Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for those that have stayed and are joining us.
You don't, but they're all on Amazon, and you can get the digital version.
Well, let everyone get settled for a minute. I'm Brian Kirland. I'm the agency and carrier accounts manager. And
Tom Cordova-Caddes. I'm the development team at LaserApp. So what we'd like to do today is spend just a few minutes giving you a little bit of overview context, sort of setting the stage, maybe setting a few guideposts of where the form selection is going, hopefully to then generate your feedback. We'd like to hear your questions, your comments. While you're doing this, please make sure you include X, because that will make this useful for us. That's what we're trying to accomplish today. So I want to, as I said, give context. I want to sort of talk about where a form wizard sits. LaserApp is built on this concept of forms being in good order, and that has a couple core components. We want to have the right forms filled out correctly and communicated clearly. That little star is because the forms wizard fits into that first piece, but it's not all of it. Right forms really means two things. Selecting the correct forms. What 5, 10, whatever it is forms do I need to fill out? And then the other piece that is really what LaserApp was founded upon is, do I have the right version of those forms? Are they up to date? And I hope we've done such a good job of that that you forgot that that's even a requirement. And so now that we keep building on our form selection, we'll have both of those pieces together and we'll have the right forms. Then we want them filled out correctly. That's why we put such an emphasis on our data integrations with CRMs, so all the data you already have comes into the forms. And then we're building our smart tool technology so that the forms themselves know what information should go on there, how long these fields should be. If your account number has to be between 4 and 6 characters, it gets done correctly as they're filling out the forms. And if you're not familiar with our smart tool technology, Brian's going to be presenting on it tomorrow afternoon. I think that's really a great companion to the conversation today about what forms we're filling out, making sure that once we get them, they're filled out with the right information. And then communicating downstream. So that's our integrations with other partners that do e-signature, document storage, and workflow. Keeping the forms alive. We talk about straight-through processing, giving you the opportunity to review that data if you have that resource on the back end, and then sending it to where it needs to be, so that we're not looking at a fax copy of a chicken scratch document. All of this goes together to make forms in good order. And so, again, we're really up at the top of that. What forms do we want to get? Robert did a great job setting the stage for that this morning, talking about 33,000 forms down to 5. And really, I don't want to spend a lot of time saying the same thing, but I want to emphasize that our goal is form selection. There are systems that do that in addition to other things, and that's not what we're targeting. We're really looking just at, how do I get to the forms that I need to fill out? And for me, I think about how humans do this today. If I'm a brand new advisor at a firm, a brand new agent, whatever terminology you like to use, I probably go to the guy down the hall who's been there a long time and say, what forms do I need to fill out? And he asks me questions. Well, are you trying to do a qualified or a non-qualified? Are you trying to do life insurance or term or annuity? And I answer his questions, and he comes back and he says, you need these 5 forms. So that's the model. People know how to interact, ask, or answer those questions, and the people who are very experienced know what questions to ask. And so what we're trying to do is encapsulate that in a way that makes sense, and that makes sense for your business, realizing that the perfect wizard for your firm is not the perfect wizard for someone sitting on the other side of this aisle, which is a challenge for us. Form selection today. So here's, form selection is not brand new. There is form selection today within the LaserApp Enterprise, within LaserApp Anywhere, and within a lot of other third-party systems that hook into LaserApp. There's scroll and select, there's searching. We allow you to set up your company form groups. And I think that publishing those groups in Anywhere was a step in the right direction of saying that people at the back office have an idea of what forms need to come together. And so there's a publishing mechanism in Enterprise, but there's I think a good step forward in the publishing mechanism in Anywhere, where as soon as you define those groups, review them, you can publish them, and they're available to all of your users. We allow the users to define their own groups because they might have individual needs that they want to represent. And then in addition to this, there are third-party solutions. There are form wizards that other companies are building for you or for other firms that are trying to do this. And those are tied very specifically to the needs of that one particular firm. As a product company, we're trying to take a different approach. We're trying to make a more generalized forms wizard process that goes and does what the question and answer type of model does in the human world. So ask that person who's your back office specialist, what are the questions that you would ask someone who doesn't know what forms they need? And then as the user, present those questions, and when they're answered, know what 5 forms comes to. There's a bit of 2 camps internally at LaserApp who have different ideas about what is important in a forms wizard. There's the data-driven approach. If the forms are self-describing and know everything about themselves, if they're a new account form or an update form or their term life 15 years form, that can give a lot of those questions meaning right from the data. And so you could put yourself on the very far left of this graph and say the data does it all. The other side of that is the configuration-driven. I talked about a person who knows what questions to ask, and you could literally sit and enter those into a platform and say the first question you should ask is, are you trying to do insurance business or securities business? And you could put yourself on the far right side of that graph. But what we are trying to do, and what we need your help with, is being somewhere in that middle zone. Now, with that said, you might find yourself very far to the left of still that middle zone or very far to the right. And the goal is to make that possible with the same platform. That if a firm sitting on this side of the auditorium is really configuration driven, they want to define those questions and those rules, and another firm is very much on the data-driven side. They want to tag their forms and have that drive the experience, that both of those things can live together inside of a mechanism that you can control. So those are my guideposts, as I said up front. Those are the things that I think are important as values, as principles, but how it will take shape is going to depend on some of the feedback we get today and some of the ideas that Brian's going to talk about. And at this point, I'm going to hand it over.
Great, thank you, Tom. Continuing on that, again, the reason we're trying to do is get you to the desired wizard selection tool that's going to work for the end user. For the carriers that are here, again, I know Protective's here, Allianz, Lincoln, Region of Omaha, and everyone else, you want to have your forms be readily available that are easy to select for that end user so that they get to the right information to get you in good order. That's what you want. So in order to do it, we have what Tom was talking about, looking for the generic guided questions versus the customized wizard. And again, kind of keeping that graph you had, which is really helpful, being able to leverage the data you have that you can get to us, and we're going to talk about that shortly, and then also give you the ability to create those questions, whether you want it to be generic or give you a tool to make your own that may be different. Again, I'm going to point at America and Brian. America's questions may be different than Brian's from Allianz, so they have the ability to kind of make it that fits how they believe their forms work versus it maybe you're going to take Terry who wants to be very generic, using 3 people I know in the meeting here today. So that's what we're trying to do, to give you that ability to define it with us so that we can give you a great industry standard tool that hopefully will make that end user experience better, easier to use, and get to that end result, which is completing the forms and getting to you in good order. So here's just a mock-up of what we would consider to be just a generic wizard window today. It may be hard to read, but so what we've done is there's basically 4 major sections to it. First one is obviously the question who you want to do business with. So it's obviously selecting the company that you're looking for. Then it's going to be the document type, and that drop-down is going to take you to obviously maybe a new business versus service, enforce, things like that, depending on the language, maybe licensing, contracting. And then from there, this is where we can get into more customized. If you have other selections beyond new business, in terms of what you may be looking for that may drive different selections, then obviously getting into state or location, and then lastly, the product name or type. And that's the information that we would look for that'll then hopefully, once that individual will know these or be able to key, I'm looking for this particular information, drive them to the next piece, which is basically the return of the data. As Robert said and Tom said, 33,000 forms, that's a large library. Or we look at, I take Terry, your library, not 33,000, but it could be maybe 500. Still, sorting through 500 to get to the 5 or 7 you need, you want to be able to get it to a point where I have my required, what I definitely need, and then of course there's those optionals that we kind of joked about. Is it a smoker, skydiver, an aviation pilot that they can obviously drag and drop across and then see what's ready for the queue, which allows you to go ahead and say, I'm good with this, I'm going to launch Laser App, and then get into the data, start pushing it in, and whether it's going to be pre-filling that X% or as much as you have, allows them to have that experience of working with the forms. So again, Robert mentioned it earlier this morning during his presentation. There was a handful of infrastructure changes in the background. Again, the wizard is going to be across multiple layers. It required a lot of stuff. There's a lot of tentacles or a lot of fingers in the pie that it had. So we had to make changes to our forms manager database so that we can actually pick up and start retaining more metadata about the forms. So there's more fields created there. Laser App Enterprise to desktop and anywhere had to be prepped to take on the ability to do this so that when we are completed with our part, it's ready to roll out and that user experience is going to be a positive one. Really beyond that, it kind of takes us to basically how we're going to get the data. I mean, that's the big key. We have forms from a lot of the carriers in the room, and how we're going to get it so that we can continue to add from what we have, because there's more data. And we've come up with a couple of options and ideas. One would be some type of template file where we can provide you what we have today. You can expand on the data. We already have file name. We have the states, but we need from you potentially the product, the required versus optional, some more information so that we can go back to those questions so that when we're selecting it, we can drive from that. We have the possibility of doing like an import of structured data if you have it in some other format that we could basically read and import into the database, do that as well as an option. And kind of leveraging, again, Robert had talked about earlier this morning about the Enterprise 11. In the Smart tool, which we'll talk about tomorrow, you have the ability of doing tagging your forms for enhanced logic, looking at a potential of doing maybe a larger, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but maybe more like I'll call it a forms manager, where you can actually then say, this form is X product, a way to kind of tag it there. It'll then reverse back to us and we can grab it and use it to leverage that. So really the choice is going to be yours. We're not going to dictate that you have to do an Excel file. We're going to give you a choice of a couple of options. And so if, again, Terry, Brian, America, who else is here, you can pick and choose what would work for you and your team. Because we're not going to sit here and say you have to go this route. That's not fair. We want it to be your experience as easy as the end user getting to the forms, being able to leverage that. Really, what's next? And I know we're all looking, saying, hey, I want to get to the cruise and have some fun. I'm not going to take much more time, but we will have open session quick for questions. But within the conference app, you have the ability of tagging some notes. I think John was going to do it. If you want to, and if you're not the contact for forms, or if there's someone else that we should add their information to it, I will get it so I can reach out to that individual so I can kind of start having these discussions, or with you as well if it is you. And again, if we can, maybe we start looking at providing some sample data so we can see exactly what you have, make sure it's what we're seeing, or maybe, again, it could be different from 4 or 5 or 100 of the carriers we're working with. Want to make sure we can normalize and use all that data. And again, additional meeting times. I know we're here today, we're here tomorrow, and I'm here through Friday. So if you are here and you have more questions, you want to talk about this more, tomorrow at 2:45, I'm doing the enhanced forms and e-signature. So 2:15, I'll be across the way in one of the side rooms. I can be there. If you want to come in early, we can have a talk about it. Friday, if you're still here and you haven't left, I can book a time in one of the side rooms, or even just grab me for a lunch or a breakfast. I'm here to have this discussion. I really want to see this continue and keep moving forward. That being said, I think Nate or someone's around with a microphone if anyone has any particular questions. Again, this is interactive. I know we have some time, but if there are questions, please, I think, or Trinidad, you coming up, or we can have people, this way we can hear you and don't have to repeat it back. There's a couple up front.
You might be wrong. Can we go back to the mock-up?
This one?
Yeah, that one.
Sure.
I'm curious as to why you have a document type like so high up in the workflow. I would think that product company and then maybe like the new business would be a better filter.
Again, it was
curious.
just the time when we did it, and one of the individuals that had worked with this last year, it was just the model we did. This is all purely rearrangeable, and so again, that could have been what we just did the first time going through it, and that was just our wireframe.
And I think that goes back to the point that the perfect wizard for you would not be the perfect wizard for someone else, and so what we don't want to do is say, oh, we found it. We found the magic formula. Everybody use this, and then find out that, well, it worked for 2-3 firms. But yeah, it may be as simple as just giving you the list of questions, and you say, get this one out of there. If that's going to do the job, that's what we want to know. Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think successful offices do the same sort of business over and over and over again. So I think it'd be a great idea once the 5 or 8 or 15 forms were identified, if there would be a way to save that so that every time you had to do that task again, you could just go to say, okay, let's have that be there. And it's kind of a follow-up. I know Adobe has this. Once you put the name into first name in one form, that name is filled in into all the other 14 forms too. So those are a couple of suggestions or thoughts that I have.
Yeah, so the save form groups was designed to do that first point that you're making, to allow you to take what's in the queue and save it for yourself, and that's in LaserApp Anywhere. I'm not sure which product you're using. And then as far as data coming across, that's what the common data model was originally designed to do. So if there are fields that aren't in the common data model that should copy across, grab Brian and make sure he knows which data you're thinking of, because if it's in the common data model, it should be doing exactly that.
Okay, from experience, I can say that each line of business is going to have a different drop-down. I think when you're looking at annuity versus life versus, securities, I do it every day. You're not going to have the same drop-downs. You're not going to have the same parameters. State, required forms. I don't know anybody who gets only 5 forms in a life product. That's like a dream. It's more like 15. So I think, yeah, that has to be flexible. And in the background, it's super important that we can have product being sent to you with dates, very specific dates of that product being turned on and off.
Sure.
And because we can't operate without that.
So like an expiration date, that kind of thing?
Right.
Okay.
The product level and the form level.
Okay.
One of the experiences that I've had is that we have some really great administrators in a number of our branches, and they take on a lot of training responsibility. And one of the things that I'm asked for constantly is, give me a flow chart or something I can run over and put a little plastic cover on, and what do I need if I'm doing this? What do I need if I'm doing that? And it just occurred to me that this wizard could be the training tool also. So in other words, if you need a form, you go to LaserApp and you start to answer the questions, and it's going to tell you what the paperwork is. I grant you, guys 5 years in and is opening an IRA account, he knows absolutely what he's going to do. He's not going to go through a wizard. He's just going to click on the app. He's going to click on a transfer form and, or a systematic investment form or whatever he needs. He knows what it's going to do. He's going to click, there it is. But there's also the oddball situations, the circumstances that don't happen all the time. And again, a wizard is going to direct those people that are doing something a little bit out of the ordinary and can be a huge help for them also. So this is definitely something that is a huge value added.
Way across.
I was just gonna say, I'd like to include the custom forms if you guys could when you did this, because like for us, our new account form, our management fee agreement for our RIA, it's all in there, but it comes up separately. So we find reps and assistants forget sometimes, and then we have to go back and say, hey, not in good order, I need that.
I think to answer that a little bit, I think that's what this screen is going to kind of help when it comes back up, is you have the required, the options, and you have the ability to go back and potentially search for more if they're not tagged with, let's say, it is a BD or something else that's not tied to, a Lincoln Financial Group's, let's say you needed your BD paperwork. So that would be a way to, again, grab it and remove or add and then be able to launch for that reason.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to the fact that the custom forms need to live as a full-fledged form in the system. And that is the goal, is for them to happen to be under a custom tag, but be programmed with a common data model, be in the system just like any other form, so you can call them, put them in groups, do what you need to do with them in the same way.
Hi, so I know that my firm has actually adopted this SMART tool, but one of the things that I find that as a sponsor, a lot of NIGOs that we get is because the advisors especially don't submit the trust documents or the corporate documents or whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. So I think a good idea would be to implement like a pop-up box where it kind of, if it selects a trust as a registration, it would kind of remind them, hey, make sure that you submit the trust documents.
Okay.
So the first part that you had with the selection tool is great. I think it's going to be a need to have a combination of both the selection and data-driven on top of it to go beyond just a simple matrix, especially when you're getting into, say, some of the clearing firms, and then some of the clearing firms that don't publish all of their forms. If there is something that could be added in there that will at least identify, like the last person mentioned, to go outside, you would have to go outside of Laser app to get the forms because not everything is submitted. So something I've seen is with NFS, they have a product called NASU, and theirs is more of a data-driven. When you're completed, it will tell you what other alternative forms should be added. Okay. So I don't know if what the plans are, or if you need individuals to reach out to the different firms, clearing firms, to get that information as well.
And let me just say that we're not taking away any integration points we have today. So if a firm or a system wants to be very tightly customized and integrated, that will all remain. And there are circumstances where that is appropriate, and that's sort of across the board. When we talk about our e-signature implementations, we don't take away the ability for you to get the data and build your own. If you need something that's outside of our scope, all of that integration is open. So right now I think we're really focused on the form selection part, and if that doesn't suit your needs, you could still do everything you need to do with the integration. Not saying we'll never go down that path, but I think right now we really have to manage the expectations that that is what we're targeting, is getting you to the right forms. Because if we let every possibility creep in, then we're looking 2-3 years down the road. So we want to really focus and target that need and try to give you a great product that does that before we start talking about phase C, D, E, and F. But good suggestions.
So a couple of ideas I think that fit in well with a number of the comments. So I'm with Mutual of Omaha, and we're very new to Laser app. So looking at this for the first time, thinking about our other forms warehouses, what we've thought about is the idea of experienced versus a non-experienced producer, and thinking about making a selection of guide me through the process, kind of like a TurboTax approach, versus I know exactly what I'm doing, so let me just dive in. That I think it'd be nice to be able to tailor the wizard to say, I need a lot of guidance. Let me answer some questions about the type of sale, so I can really drive out those extra forms that I need. As carrier, well, at least for Mutual of Omaha, as a carrier, we try to put as many forms as we can into the standard kind of packet, we call it, but we don't want to overwhelm the producer with a number of forms that they don't need. So it would be nice, kind of like the idea of a pop-up is you've just answered a question that makes the system realize you need to pull in another form. So maybe start with the standard, but then through some of the questions of things that aren't as common, be able to pull in some forms and help them. Because we put notes on like our application forms, but that doesn't really help. You need to pull in the form. So just a couple of ideas.
Do we know if there's any plans down the road to involve the licensing aspect of, let's just say, a nipper or something along those lines, where we're not providing the representative or the agent with forms they don't need because they don't belong to that state? They don't have to search down.
No.
They don't have to say, you know, I can only do business in Louisiana and Texas. Why am I looking at all this other business? Is there any integration there?
Yeah, so state is an example of something we have today with the insurance paperwork. And so that idea would also go to, let's say, the custom form. So I'm going to use those two examples and not dive too much outside of that. But if as you're creating your configuration for the wizard, you say at the end of this chain, it should be these three that everybody uses, and then whatever form is state specific that fits this criteria that we can use to say, if you're doing California, it should be California. If you're doing, then that would be it. Or if it's the custom form, if every office has a custom version of the XYZ form, but at the end of this, I need these two forms plus the custom form that's the XYZ custom form, that needs to fit into the model. And that's one of the challenges that we have, is that we can't just say, here's the form. And it gets even worse when forms start updating. That's the one thing I had on my notes that I didn't mention. This system has to retain its integrity when that California, Arizona, and Nevada form becomes a California and Arizona form, and the Nevada form is now a new form with a completely different ID that wasn't in the system before. We have to account for that. And so that has been one of the challenges, is how do we make it specific enough that we know what forms, but general enough that we know how to find the right form when circumstances change. Yeah.
So this is all just like the proof of concept setup. Like you guys are trying to figure out exactly how to put together the drop-down menu for the user to use.
Are you talking about what's on the screen right now?
What was
so
on the
I
screen?
would consider this one example template that we might give you, and we're going to give you a tool that would allow you to build one just like this, or completely different from this.
And wouldn't that work? Okay. So right there's a way to eliminate the bulk of the selection as far as them going through, particularly if it's a life insurance product versus if it's a clearing firm or anything. You would have to have the companies in themselves, like Jackson National Life. You know, it's a variable annuity company. They also have VULs and fixed products, but they don't have mutual funds. They don't have a clearing firm agreement. So those forms will all be eliminated. But if on your form order, if you could select those companies in a way to flag them of like only these products are available, that would drill down even further whether or not it was non-qualified or qualified, which would tell you if it's qualified, you know, is it a Roth, is it a SEP? I mean, you could go through the selection, but firm-wide, you could have each firm set up the global statements of if you open an IRA at RBC Dane, these are the forms you're always going to need. These forms are always required. And then as they go in for that specific company, you could go adjust that one attribute and say, well, in this case, you know, this form isn't needed. But you could do it product specific, but in order for the users to do it, they're going to have to do it globally to apply to all of the forms. Otherwise, they'd have to go in and map Laser App's going to have to map every single instances of all of those forms, including all the optionals. I mean, I guess it's more of a statement than a question, but
yeah. So that's where the data meets the configuration, and that's what makes it challenging. Is how do you configure the? I mean, one approach is yes, you go through, you make the configuration tool, the back office part of this, as quick and easy as possible to get through all those combinations and define them all. And then the other side is you let the data tell you where you need to finish. So you'll let us know when we put out the beta if we've accomplished it. But that is the goal: is to have the data inform the choices, have the choices inform what data we need.
Perfect. Thank you for the feedback, Tom. Thank you, Brian. Thanks everyone for joining. We're going to give you time to go up, make a change if you need to, and then head back down. Again, we are available throughout the conference if you want a further discussion on any of the topics here. If you want to stay in contact as we keep building requirements for the system, make sure you get in contact with Brian. and then we will go ahead and schedule continuing discussion with this over the next couple of months. So this isn't the end of this discussion. But thank you, and enjoy the evening.